So, with that, it is my pleasure to welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Tennille Murray, and I'm now the Political Affairs Director at the Australian Jewish Association. Tonight, we're focusing on a subject that's taken on a new urgency: the rapidly changing relationship between Australia and Israel. The recent months and years have brought significant diplomatic and political shifts, and understanding their implications is essential for our community. To guide us through what's happened, what it means, we are privileged to be joined by Dr. Danny Lamm AM. Dr. Lamm is a deeply respected and well-known figure in the Australian Jewish community. He's led major national organisations, including the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, the Zionist Federation of Australia, and he currently serves as the president of Mizrachi Australia, vice chairman of World Mizrachi, president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and is a member of the board of governors of the Jewish Agency for Israel. There is more to add to his resume, but we did decide that was enough for the introduction. His extensive leadership across Australian, Israeli, and global Jewish institutes make him the right choice to talk to us tonight about this evolving moment. Dr. Danny Lamm, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you to Neil. Thank you, David, and thank you, Robert, for inviting me to address you all tonight. There are so many things that were said by Robert and to Neil that one can spin off from. Congratulations for your activity in Canberra. And I want to draw a little connection to a local situation. Last night, I attended Haskara. Joe Goldbaum will remember Gary Stock, who was the head of Beitar. And Gary's yard site was last night, and afterwards, his Israeli family all gathered together afterwards. All the young people, all the young men were wearing pistols. This memorial was in Ramat Raziel. This is part of Israel that the rest of the world at least accepts, other than those who are against anti-Israel. And they wear it for a reason, because there is occasional terrorism that takes place, and local citizens are the ones who have neutralized these terrorist activities. And so they explained that they were able to get the guns to protect fellow citizens because of the decisions of the Minister of Police, Ben Gvir. What's very important here is to understand that there needs to be people who are prepared to say things the way they really are and not to be PC the whole time. Now, I'm not making a comparison between AJA and Minister Ben Gvir, except that the government of Israel benefits from having a Ben Gvir in its government, as does a Smotrich. Yet, nevertheless, people are in Israel are trying to diminish the value of these organisations in the same way as people in Australia are trying to run down the AJA. It's very important that you persist in carrying on in what you're doing. I'm meant to speak tonight about Australia-Israel relations, and I think it's kind of amusing that part of the citation associated with me getting the AM, the award, is for advancing and enhancing the relations between Australia and Israel. That was certainly something that was considered of importance in 2016 when I got the honour that the Australian government thought that was important. Rolene and I have been in Israel for the last few weeks, but we had a week off. We went to Poland on a World Mizrachi tour, visiting Holocaust sites. And what struck me is Poland, which is actually quite a pretty nation, beautiful fields, very established cities, managed to murder 3 million of their people, Jewish citizens. And yet life continued absolutely normally around. Notwithstanding they were under the occupations of the Germans, they jumped on board. So a death camp like Majdanek was next to the main road, next to the city, adjacent to it. So everybody could see everything was going on. and people walked past with prams and children, didn't make any difference. It tells you that life can carry on parallel. There can be a parallel life of comfort and normality at the same time as others are being persecuted. And one cannot ignore that reality. And in fact, in the last day or two, one of a Polish member of Parliament there, an MP, is reputed to have made a statement, you've probably seen it, where he said Poland is for Poles, not for Jews. And this is 80 years later. It's just beyond belief. I bring some personal thoughts in relation to Australia-Israel relationships. I've been a committed conservative member of the political thought all my life, and for most of it, we had a government and a series of prime ministers who were pro-Israel, and we just worked together and worked together extremely well. I was president of the Zionist Federation from 2014 to 2018. And I had a sense that at some stage government will change and it'll move to a Labor government. That's the way it is in Australia. And my experience with Julie Gillard when she was Prime Minister was exemplary. We had a meeting with her. I led a delegation of the Zionist Federation, ECAJ, always tried to bring all the organisations together, and AJAC with her, which at that time Australia was part of the Security Council of the United Nations. There was a raft of anti-Israel resolutions every year, and we were very keen that Australia would not support them at the Security Council. The Americans were very keen that that should happen. The Israeli government was very keen that that should happen. And the reason being that if sufficient nations refuse to support those resolutions, then it doesn't pass. They've got to have 9 to go ahead out of the 15. And America didn't have to veto them. Julie Gillard stuck to a word and she voted against those anti-Israel resolutions. I have to say that we understood afterwards that the then Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd was trying to encourage her to abstain on that, but she refused to accede to his pressure and the pressure of Bob Carr and others, and she stuck by her guns. So even if there was going to be a Labor government, there isn't reason to assume that things would change dramatically. Bill Shorten, who was the then Prime Minister of Australia, was then leader of the opposition, and the aspiring Prime Minister was extremely positive towards Israel and extremely positive towards the Jewish community. Given the fact that we thought during that period between 14 and 18 that the next election, which was taking place in 2019, was going to see a Labor majority, together with the embassy, the Zionist Federation of Australia brought out Merav Michaeli, who was the then leader of the Labor Party in Israel. And the contention was that if Labor's problem with Israel is the right-wing government of Bibi Netanyahu, let's bring somebody from the left out so they can see that they've got a common ideology and approach. Not necessarily agreeing on everything, but they can find a mateship and a connection there. Bill Shorten cooperated very much with that. We had a lot of events. We introduced her around, and we had a lunch in Parliament, which was conducted by the Zionist Federation and the embassy. And Bill Shorten had all his shadow cabinet there. I personally chose as president, but I chose not to sit with Bill because I knew where Bill was, completely favourable to us. I sat with Anthony Albanese, just him and me alone, and I tried to engage him in conversation and get his support. I got the cold shoulder, and I had a sense then that Anthony Albanese was not going to be our friend. Of course, I knew his background as being a pro-Palestinian when he was a student. But sometimes people are one thing when they're students. They change when they get a bit older and a bit more life experience. but I left with a very uncomfortable feeling. Contact with Penny Wong was the same. I had a quite 2 hour meeting in a pub in Fitzroy Street with Tony Burke, who was one of the leaders in the shadow cabinet, to see if over time we could achieve some change. And I met with others over the time, and I came away with a very negative sense from all of them. And I decided in 2017 that maybe I'm not the best person to continue leading the Zionist Federation, because there's not going to be a easy working relationship with them. As we all know, the 2019 election had a surprise result, and the Liberals, Scott won that election, Scott Morrison. He was very pro-Israel, as we know. And so I kind of jumped the gun and didn't continue as running the federation at the time. But subsequently, as we know, events have changed, and we've all been party to seeing how the relationship has simply diminished over time. Votes in the United Nations, statements, recognition of a future Palestinian state, all of which was a pointless exercise, but it certainly has muddied the water as far as the relationship between Australia and Israel is concerned. And somehow the obvious inherent sense and logic that would be associated with such a recognition isn't buoyed by any of the facts that the Palestinians don't have an apparatus to run a state. There isn't a democracy there. There isn't elections. There isn't anything there that would substantiate the support of a potential future state and a member of the United Nations. That hasn't buoyed them, and it's an attitudinal thing. In my opinion, they simply are not positively orientated towards the security and the safety of the state of Israel, notwithstanding the fact that I keep saying that. In practice, the establishment of a Palestinian state will merely be a springboard for constant attacks on the population in Israel. What took place in Gaza is the best demonstration of that in 2005 with the Hitnatkut, the disengagement from Gaza. Some of us said, and some people said in Israel, this is a very bad move. I was then the president of the Zionist Council, and I said, this is a mistake. This is my personal opinion. I don't speak on behalf of the Zionist Council, but this is a terrible tragedy. This will be a spearhead for attacks on us. And so it proved to be, and it's been a disaster. And at that particular point in time, the Israeli government said, if anything happens, we'll go in and take them out. But it doesn't quite work that way. And even today, notwithstanding the fact that Israel has won the IDF commanding victory in so many different fields of this war, and in particular in relation to Gaza, the UN wants to actually be the arbiter of what takes place there. And for those who aren't aware, the history of Gazan hate for Jews goes back to a pivotal date in 1916, when the Ottomans came to the the Jewish population that had lived there for maybe since the Churban Bayit Sheni, maybe since the destructions of the temple, certainly for hundreds of years, and said, we can't guarantee your safety anymore here. And they evacuated out all the Jewish community in 1916 for their safety from the local population. So there's a very bad history there, and it was evident. Now, the hottest point for soldiers in Israel at the moment is in the area of Judea and Shomron and Samaria, where serious terrorism attempts are being made. Notwithstanding that, and the Australian government knows that. I mean, they see it. It's not that it's hidden to them. They've still maintained this colder approach, and that's a serious concern. And I can't see any confidence that position will easily change. The past Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, was not heard in the defence of Israel, even though he's got good background for knowing, what's going on. And so we've got a serious problem there with that. Now, the impact of all of that is twofold. One is the obvious anti-Semitism that's developed around the country, because in a situation where there is an anti-Israel message that's coming from the government, there are bodies there who immediately see that as a green light for their activity. The manner in which the demonstrations that have taken place on a weekly basis, certainly in Melbourne and Sydney, which have disrupted civilian life and trade right through the city, are ones that it's hard to see how something like that would have been permitted in the past. And the Some of the people participating in those demonstrations are coming out with massively anti-Semitic cries and demands and statements, and which don't seem to have been acted on, even though there are laws in place for them to do that. It's a two-way thing. The population, the government sees this political activity and maybe says, well, we're on the right track. And the demonstrators see the inactivity of the government in reacting against that. And so this vicious cycle that people talk about is one that's maintained. When we had these meetings in the past with the political leadership in Canberra, and Robert and Tennille will certainly have seen that. You would go to the Liberals or Nationals and you would get encouragement and support. You would go to some Labor members, there were some who would be positive. Even the Greens of an earlier time weren't as vociferous in their attacks on Israel as they now are. They are clearly a hopeless case, and I can understand why you didn't go and meet them. But at the same time, we have friends, and Pauline Hanson, who you have this a good relationship, is one. And the fact that she's got a different approach on certain areas to others doesn't mean that she should be put in cherem, that she should be excluded from discussion. That's, in my view, ridiculous. How she conducts herself in the Senate and the various antics that go on is one thing. But the end result is she's a friend, and we should acknowledge that. Just as I can't remember her name now, but the senator from Tasmania has always been a friend. These are people that we have to carry a relationship with and support. We must not go down the track of excluding people because we think they're beyond the pale for some political reason, like, for example, Pauline Hanson. This is one of the attitudes of American jury who are so antagonistic to an individual that they're going to vote the other way. So, for example, we're told that 32% of Jews in New York who voted for the mayor voted for Mamdani because they couldn't tolerate Trump. And yet Trump has been our absolute best friend, our savior, beyond any previous American president or any leader anywhere in the world has done things for us. And people have voted in Mamdani. And the consequence is that New Yorkers are starting to questioning their future. If I were asked about what the outcome of all this will be in terms of and connecting to my earlier comments about Poland, where we had this tragedy of this wholesale murder going on, and the whole world standing by and doing nothing. I think that the very substantial distinction is that all these things could take place in countries that permitted them to take place or encouraged them to take place. The top level supported, instigated it, led it, or enabled it. That's, in my opinion, not something that's going to take place in Australia at any time, and yet there is a level of discomfort. I have to say that Ambassador Amir Maimon has repeatedly said in public and to me personally that at all times the government has acted diplomatically, professionally, in respect to him and have treated him correctly, and that is encouraging. I mean, the door isn't closed, and he even says that's in referred as far as the Foreign Minister Penny Wong is concerned. So we hope that things will maintain some sort of core of civility. Um, I want to tell you that in my time here in Israel, one of the questions that I repeatedly get asked by citizens and friends is what's going on in Australia because people are quite horrified by what they're seeing happen in Australia and very, very concerned. And they are fully aware of the political change. It's like a 180-degree turnaround from what we've had previously. So, in summary, my concerns are number one, that the current trajectory of the Australian government will continue in the way that it is. That the logical outcome of that is will be a distancing between the two countries. That there's already been calls for divestment in different forms. They've identified a number of firms that do very important trade from Israeli firms that do very important trade with Australia, ones that are actually critical to the security of Australia. Um, so if they're prepared to cut off their nose to spite their face, you wonder where it all goes. I think at state level too, certainly in Victoria, Victorian jury would be very disappointed with the Jacinta Allen government in their treatment of all this. All this, apart from as Australians, we all care about Australia. We care about Victoria. We care as a Victorian, and New South Welshman's the same, and so on. Care about the future for our country, and um, we want it to be better, not just for ourselves, but for all of Australia. I wear that approach in relation as both as an Australian and as a Jew. And I just want to say one final thing. Um, my personal belief is that if we're very strong and assertive, we're better able to protect ourselves than if we're meek and humble and are scared to associate or connect. You know, if there were demonstrations in the city, if there's a group there that wants to give counter demonstration, then that's exactly what they should do. Um, Maybe Tennille, it's time for questions.
Thank you, Danny. We're actually going to go to our CEO, Robert Gregory, to do a short interview with you. So please, Robert Gregory.
Yeah, I'll just ask you a couple of questions, but just before I do, I want to give a big thank you to Dr. Danny Lamm for always supporting ECAJ and the Lamm family as well. We're very grateful for your many years of support and for your knowledge that you're sharing with us. I wanted to ask you, a lot of people have noticed the younger generation, even amongst the Jewish community, are turning on the community. We've seen groups like Jewish Council, New Israel Fund, in the US, it's much worse. We've even seen some of the comments talking about the Mamdani victory. A lot of Jews voted for them. So what's going on is some people say the reform movement played a part. Other people are saying, other reasons. I'll leave it to you if there's what's happening.
Look, there are going to be groups that spring up, and the JCA is one of the ones that you mentioned this and so on. And over our Jewish history, um, they've always been outliers. For example, if you pick we talk about Mamdani, we're getting so-called rabbis being part of his team for preparation for when he takes over and so on. There are Jewish people who see things in a different light. I personally don't understand it, but they exist. I think we've got to persist in following our philosophies and our ideology and our concern for all of Jewry, our concern for Medinat Israel, our concern for our fellow Australian citizens, and identify that these are minorities, and I question their integrity, obviously. Look, the background, however, is this, and we can't ignore that. I think our leadership, all of us, fell asleep at the wheel for 20 or 30 years. We don't know exactly. Opposition to Israel and the denigration of Israel and the attacks on Jews have been funded by other players for a very long time. And we talk about Qatar and maybe Saudi, I don't know where the funds are coming. And you talk about Soros, big money that's gone in to undermine our case. And we didn't know that this was going on. But I want to tell you this. I want to tell you two stories, brief two stories. One, in my dental practice, non-Jewish clientele, and I got letters of support from patients from all over the place. We support Israel, we support you, and don't be dismayed. And I want to tell you another story. I spoke in a synagogue, I've spoken to a few here, and there was a group of Aussie kids there, and I pointed to one of them and I said, this young man here, he plays for Ajax football team. He's Shomer Shabbat, most of his team is, and the competition's on Shabbat, and yet every fixture that they play on is on Sunday because the games are rescheduled to enable the games to play on Shabbat. Now, I went to the final, which they happened to lose, but they played a terrific game and it was rough and ready, really tough, and punching and all sorts of things. But at the end of the game, everybody got together and shook hands and had a drink together. I don't know how many teams are in that competition. In AFL, it's 18. I don't know if there's a dozen or 14 or 16. All the other clubs agreed to play on Sunday. That's their day off. They're used to playing on Saturday because the vast majority of Australians are not represented by the riffraff that we're seeing. Look, 90,000 people walked across that bridge. 90,000 people is less than 0.3%, 0.2% of the population of Australia. We mustn't get dismayed by and think that this represents Australian thought. It doesn't represent Australian thought. But our Jewish kids are affected by this as well. And some of them believe the disinformation and the misinformation, and they don't see that Israel was fighting for its life. That was an existential war. And then Israel had to fight on the Lebanese front and the Syrian front and the Iranian front and the Yemeni front and Gaza and the attacks from around the world, politic that Israel has to fight. The attacks on Bibi from my perspective, are totally unsubstantiated, and he's suffered tremendously, both in health-wise and physically, from the attacks, because people simply don't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, I think some of those attacks on Bibi have come from like Australian Jewish organizations, with different issues, whether it was judicial reform, members of the government, different things like that. Do you think it's appropriate for diaspora Jewish organizations to be publicly attacking Israel's democratically elected government in that way?
Look, I think it's appalling. And I have to tell you that when I was president of those various movements, notwithstanding if there was a left-wing government in Israel and I'm on the other side, I would never, never have either permitted or chosen to criticize the government. Nevertheless, when the government decided to do the hit not kut, I had to step aside and make a personal statement against the disengagement because I could see where it was going. So it's a bit of a thin line, but it ought to be on an issue of principle and not an issue of personality. Um, and I guess you have to judge the cases, but to accept the fact that Israel conducts genocide, it's appalling. And if you listen to a Richard Kemp or you listen to a Michael Scott or you listen to various leaderships or the Prime Minister of Argentina and so on, who acknowledge that Israel is the most ethical army in the world, and we've lost over close to 1,000 soldiers in this last 2 years. I mean, you can't. I mean, Israel's fighting for its life, and that has to be recognised. And we've got to stand up and protect, our country and protect our people. The children of Israel are a light unto the nations, and with totally genuine, try and do the best. We know that. We have to let the world know that as well, including your young people. And then from time to time, you'll have some aberrant ones for sure. We've got to just accept that. Our Jewish history is complicated because our people at times of crisis have not known how to pull together. There was one time when the people all pulled together in Torah times, okay? But Kishechad b'lev echad, one people, one heart. At Kriyat Yamsuf, at the division of the Red Sea, the people divided into four groups. At the conclusion of King Solomon's unbelievable regime of leadership, Malchut, of his kingship, it ended up a division between Rehoboam, his son, who was his successor, and Yerovam ben Nevat, and it ended up with two tribes and 10 tribes, and the 10 tribes got lost. So we've got to work very hard. And here in Israel, I repeatedly hear that there needs to be achdut, unity. We have to forge that. At our own local level, we've got to be able to tolerate there are people on the left and right and so on. When I led the Zionist movement in Australia, and now my involvement at the World Zionist Organization, I pushed all the way for a recognition that everybody's got a place at the table. The end result of the World Zionist elections, that Congress elections, has ended up in a situation where nearly everybody is represented around the table. Not everybody's represented, but nearly everybody in the leadership of the World Zionist movement. And it's been the new president is Rabbi Doron Perez. This is exactly what he's preaching. We have to work together. There was a rabbi that I learned from who said to me, we are not God's policemen, we are God's salesmen. I'm not preaching now about religious life. I'm talking about let's be broader. Let's tolerate more. Let's work together.
It's a very interesting point you make because, as I said, for anyone who's come in late, like I received a call from one of these large Jewish organizations, saying we have to delete this picture of Pauline Hanson, and they said if we don't, they're gonna have us kicked out of some upcoming thing. So it's interesting, the spirit of unity, that is there space in the Australian Jewish community for people that have a different perspective, which I know represents a lot of the Australian Jews, all you people here. Like it's all, it's an attack on a large part of the Jewish community. But I'll go to my last question because I see we've got so many people with their hands up and we want to get to as many as we can. So do you think there's going to be an increase in Aliyah from Australia? And have you noticed anyone or more people speaking about it? Do you think its numbers will meaningfully change?
People are definitely speaking about it. There's no question at all. But there's push and pull factors here. I mean, there are people in our community who believe in the Jewish state and want to give it support and think about it for their children and their grandchildren, and think about Israel with pride, and they want to be part of it. Look, I'm here in Israel now. I've got to tell you guys, it's spectacular. The development that's going on and the efficiencies and the capabilities, the ingenuity is simply outstanding. I'm sitting in a building now, it's a business deal that I'm involved in, and this building has been built by the developers that we're dealing with, and this particular project is just fantastic. Supermarkets, office, residential, all in one big site. There's some fantastic things going on in Israel, and there's some beautiful people in Israel, and there's some terrific stuff going on in all levels. So that's the pull factor. On the push factor, I think people have been very unsettled. There's no question about that. I don't know whether the Aliyah numbers have gone up. You know, I used to be the chairman of Aliyah, the Jewish agency, the actual Aliyah office of the Jewish agency in Israel. And I was chairman for 8 years. And the numbers of Olim went up and down from 19 or 20,000 to over 50,000 over a period of time. Currently, the numbers of Olim are down at the 25 mark or something like that. We know that there's been an enormous number of case files opened where people are expressing interest. And so, you know, I would estimate that numbers will come up. I think Americans are being very unsettled, New Yorkers in particular. The New Yorkers are moving in two directions. They're thinking about moving to Israel, and they're moving to Florida. But I met somebody over the last week who was moving to Denver. People are moving. That's happening. And the proof will be in the pudding whether the numbers will go up. But there's another thing that I have to report on too. People have been very affected by this war. The PTSD level is extremely high, and even people who haven't been physically hurt in the fighting are very affected. And of course, people across the board, their kids are in the army, and that's a massive tension for everybody. I have got no time for the Haredi point of view that refuses to serve. It's simply appalling. It's disgusting. It's totally unacceptable, and I'm prepared to say it out very, very publicly. But at the same time, there are some left-wingers in the Tel Aviv area who are also encouraging their kids not to participate. There's a certain segment of this community, of the Israeli community, who are carrying enormous load and 200 and 300 and 400 and 500 days, and have been affected by in their businesses and in their employment because they just couldn't go on. And those people need help. The state has to help them. And when Keren Hayesod and UIA is raising money for support, or any of the other organisations, you know, I'm not pushing one particular or another. We all have to think about how we can support, because people are. Look, I want to tell you something. I was at a new synagogue that has been built in a kibbutz or in the south, right next to Rafah, in the southernmost point of Otef Aza, the envelope of Aza, and it's in fact supported by the Lamm family, by Rafi and Eliza, and that kibbutz, when October the 7th happened, it was Shabbat, so the gates were up, everything was closed off. The terrorists didn't penetrate, so they went to an adjacent one, a non-religious kibbutz, and they attacked them. And the adjacent kibbutz made contact with Shlomit and said, "Can you spare us some of your defenders, the Kita Konanut, the local CSG. Four of them went across. No citizen of that kibbutz got killed, but the four fighters did. And so that Shlomit suffered, and Keren Hayesod was looking for projects to support them, UAA, and one of the projects is they wanted to build a synagogue, a community centre, which Rafi has Lisa have generously supported, and we went to the opening, and the main speaker was the widow of the leader of the four. This is a young woman with 7 children. She's lost her husband, and she's there in Shlomit, and of course, incredibly grateful because this synagogue is named after her husband and the others. People are carrying a tremendous load there, and when people complain and attack Israel, they need to know the tremendous pain that's being suffered here as well.
Thank you, Danny. Just speaking of mental health and Israelis in general, this might be the perfect time to announce that in February 2026, there is going to be a very special series of events where former President Rivlin is coming to Australia, and the Australian Jewish Association is partnering with the Institute for Social Momentum on a fundraiser to raise money to support the mental health and emotional recovery for Israelis and the Jewish communities worldwide that were affected by October 7. So you'll see more about that in our newsletters, and we'll be sending out the information to purchase tickets, but it's a worthy cause and it's something we really need to support and focus on. We'll go to our questions. There's so many questions, not much time. We'll start with John Lockwood. Please unmute.
Hi, Danny. Good to see you again. I might have been part of that football game playing for Old Collegians against Ajax on a Sunday, one of the first amateur football grand finals many years ago. So I don't know if you were playing for Ajax at that particular point of time, but anyway, just a...
John, you would have been in ruck.
Yes, I was. Yeah. Fascinating. We make connections. And thank you to Robert and to Neil. I hope you've made lots of connections with Israel Allies caucus members in the federal parliament, and they've given you great support. As you know, I'm part of that as chairing the caucus foundation. So, Danny, I just want to ask you, I'm coming back to local, and when you come back to Melbourne, which I presume you will be next year, we're in for a political, what do you call it? They're going to decide upon our next parliamentary in Victoria. How do we, as Christians and Jews, work together to have an influence in the Victorian Parliament, is my question, because I know you have a great love of we need to change and how do we go about it and how do we connect. And as you've said, unity is the key. That's my question.
So I have a tremendous appreciation for the Christian Friends of Israel and Jewry, and John, you're one of its leaders and have been for a long time, and you invited me to speak at various events and so on. I'm very appreciative of that. We, each of us, have to befriend members of parliament. In my case, John, it's over the Shabbos table on Friday night. And now's not the time, but many have been in our home. And in your case, it's the same. You've got Judeo-Christian ethics, morality, value. That's got to be passed across. Because if people have ethics and morality, if they're genuine, they've got to see things the right way. Okay. So I think, and we've got to liaise together and work together. I'm totally supportive of that. And you've got a Christian Jewish association and so on. These are groups that have to be supported. Those people who are involved in Jewish leadership have long valued the friendships we've made together. So it's got to be personal. And I want to say this, not only to the politicians, but thought leaders, media, invite the people into your home, make the connection, because each one of you has got values to share and intelligent thoughts and a contribution to help educate people that are then involved in educating others. So if you, I mean, if you're meeting with, I mean, obviously the people that are the main columnists and writers for the Australian, I mean, these people are top draw, and let's expose them. Let's get them out there speaking to more people, because that they make a tremendous difference, and we've got to connect with the other ones as well and bring them over the line. So I think that's the answer, John. It's just one-on-one.
Thank you, Danny. Saul, would you like to unmute, please?
Danny, thank you very much for your talk. Could I ask you, how do you think Australia can go about being influenced by those countries that it values and supports and says are family, Palau and Papua New Guinea, who support Israel as well? How can we use those countries to help us in getting the Australian government a little more aware of things?
I think that's very, very interesting, Saul. Nice to make your acquaintance. Very, very interesting. First of all, I know that the Israeli Foreign Office is working on that, unquestionably. Obviously, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Singapore, these countries are all very supportive. I have to tell you that some of the organizations that you know of are doing that work. And the institute that I'm president of, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, is doing that, and ECAJ is definitely doing that too. The more we reach out, the better we are, and it can be done quietly. It can be done more publicly. This is a very sensible approach, Saul, unquestionably.
Thank you. Jeff, would you like to unmute, please?
Shalom, Danny. Other than Richard
Shalom.
Miles, Shalom. Other than Richard Miles, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, is there anybody in the Labor Party, any incantation of even the state governments, who actually support Israel, or you could talk to, or both? Mind you, what if you found 10 or 5 or 2 or 1? Pardon me for quoting from the Torah with a certain amount of sarcastic humor. But go, Danny, all yours.
Thanks, Jeffrey. There are. We used to have a very good relationship with Don Farrell, for example. Okay, that was an excellent one. I mean, Bill Shorten was terrific. I can't go through all the names now. Look, I can only think about a change in government to go forward, because I think the Labor government is led by the left wing. It's led by people who are, in the main, have never worked, in the normal scheme of things, other than through unions and bureaucracy. I cannot see light at the end of that tunnel, Jeffrey. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Danny. Hugh, please unmute.
Hi, Danny. It's good to see you. I've just got a question about the two-state solution. I think probably all of us on this call are in the same place as far as the two-state solution is concerned. But there are MPs, and I've discussed this with John as well, who are friends of Israel, and they support the two-state solution because they've never been given an alternative. Whereas with many in the government, I think they realize that for Israel to accept a two-state solution is suicide, and therefore they support it. What can we do to encourage MPs, politicians, state and federal, to see the two-state solution for what it is, apart from the fact that from a legal perspective, it's got no basis whatsoever.
Look, you, lovely to see you as always. The two-state solution is no solution whatsoever. The two-state intention is increased attempts at destruction of Israel. Again, it's the same thing. We've got to speak to people individually, explain the facts of life. And it's helpful that the Israeli government and the Prime Minister has now said there is no two-state solution. For a long time, Israel kowtowed to that. I mean, Oslo, which starts with a zero and ends with a zero, was one that we understood didn't have a future. And for a long time, successive governments went along with it because, okay, we'll say it that, and that's the end of it. It's time to call facts. It is what it is, to say it is, and we have to now back off from that, and we have to say that is not. I mean, apart from the fact that I personally believe that Judea and Samaria is the rump of Israel, that historically and religiously and everything else has to be part of Israel, we have to be confident to say that game is over. That is past, and the people who want to see that shall find the space in the 57 Islamic nations around the world. Now, one of the things that's going on is the Abraham Accords has been a fantastic boon. The attempts to develop relationships with Indonesia and the purported statements of its president to say that Israel's security is absolutely paramount for the future is one that has to be encouraged and supported, and has to be conveyed to, because if the president of Indonesia, of 222 million Islamic people, can say that Israel has to be protected and has to be secure and all the rest of it, then surely our Australian parliamentary friends can understand that that applies to them too. And there's simply no future for any Jewish leader who, of a communal organisation, of a head of a group, who continues to make references to the two-state solution, ought to step aside. Can't have mixed messages.
Michael, please unmute.
Hi, I joined a little bit late, so I apologize if I'm asking a question that was already asked. I grew up in the Sydney Jewish community. I made Aliyah 25 years ago. I'm now connecting from Israel. My question to you, Danny, is why is the Jewish community in the last 2 years being so weak? Why aren't we out there protesting like the pro-Palestinians? I personally believe a week after the huge protests on our Harbour Bridge, that we should have had at least 20, 30,000 Jews and non-Jews out there on that bridge. In other words, I'm basically saying running away has never served the Jews throughout our history.
Michael, I'm with you 100%. Look, at certain levels, there has been strong rebuttal of that sort of stuff. There are people here who have seen the violence that comes from these anti-Israel demonstrations and therefore discourages people. I'll give you an example. Somebody I know won't mention who walked straight through a pro-Palestinian demonstration and screamed back at them very, very aggressively. He wasn't touched, but the police came to him and said, "Please don't rock the boat." The police attitude has been counterproductive quite clearly. And without going into details, certain organisations in the community have tried to discourage the community from doing it. I think it comes from a good place. I think it's misplaced. So the Lions of Judah group that is in fact demonstrating against is one that should be encouraged, and they should be respected for their tenacity and prepared to go on. Sometimes people have this expression, Michael, stille hate, keep everything quiet. Our Jewish community hasn't, sorry, I'm just getting a cramp. Our Jewish community hasn't always been strong. I have to tell you a very sad story. My father was in yeshiva in Slovakia, Hungarian Slovakia, their yeshiva had the biggest number of young people in the village, and they weren't taught to fight, and they were intimidated by the local people in pre-war, okay, instead of going out and fighting, okay. It takes a certain education. My father taught me he didn't care about whether I played basketball or football well. All that he mattered to him was that I knew how to fight. We have to teach our kids to stand up, and you've got it in Israel. You've got it in Israel, and you may not have heard that I spoke about it, that young Israelis today and older Israelis are armed now because the country, the government recognise that they need the citizens of Israel to help fight back against terror attacks. And in the majority of cases, it's the local citizens that take out the attackers. And I said it earlier, and I'm not a supporter or anything like that, but Ben Gvir has created a situation where people have the right to get a gun and can protect themselves and protect other people. Kol hakavod, and that's what I'm hearing across the board, by the way, notwithstanding the fact that they may not like certain things that he says or how he goes about business. And our people have to tough up it as well. All our children have to be taught how to defend themselves. Can't go to a museum and tolerate the fact that other children make comments and not demand from that museum that this is unacceptable. I mean, they were too young, the children, to be able to respond, but older ones have to learn.
Thank you, Danny. We are just about out of time, but before we close up, I wanted to ask you, and we did promise you to talk a bit about the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Maybe if you can expand on what it is, how we can support it, donate.
Very happy to. I'm not seeking to raise the money now or anything like that. But the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security was established by Ephraim Inbar about 8 years ago, was there because there was a recognition that the government wasn't necessarily, or the IDF wasn't thinking strategically enough. And as an illustration of that, I'll tell you two things. That in the period in the year before October the 7th, by the way, Rolene and I were here on October 7th, we were involved in many different ways, but our group said, watch out for Gaza, okay? We have to take it seriously. By the way, there are articles now who are concerned about the Egyptians too, that they've taken advantage of it in a lot of ways. And we have to be serious about, the government has to be serious. And JIS is supporting that. And another one was, there was an Ehud Barak doctrine, which was to reduce the size of the army. And a year before, the Jerusalem Institute had a major symposium, which was sold out. Hundreds of people came, mainly army people, who said, this is a mistake. We've got to return to the model of the citizen army. We can't just rely on technology. And technology is great if the people listen to the technology. Nebuch, those girls that died, the Tatzpaniyot, the girls who were Mitzpaniyot, who saw what was happening and reported it back to the army, were rejected, and we saw the consequences. So JIS is putting together strategies for government, for the IDF. We've got senior people. We've got Major General Yaakov Amidrol. We've got Brigadier General Menno Bachrach, Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, all on board. And I'm going to read to you very quickly some of the points that I asked him to prepare for me. The main issues are the fate of the ceasefire in Gaza and whether Hamas is ready to disarm or should Israel take the necessary steps to disarm it. The United States focuses on making sure the ceasefire holds, and this may lead to a new reality in which Gaza is going to be divided between Hamas and Israel. We are, of course, prefer disarming of Hamas, because this would mean that Hamas was defeated and the Palestinians will not have the appetite for new terror attacks in the future. Other important points are the escalation in Lebanon, where we need to make sure that Hezbollah does not rearm and redeploy in the south. In Iran, the problem is that they are so much under pressure, they have to decide whether to escalate or show flexibility as time is running out for them. Another problem is the difficulty moving forward on the normalization track and the growing commitment of the US to Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. This group is a group of some 25 researchers, all specialists, one on Russia and one on Turkey and one on Ukraine and one on Iran and all around the world, providing their information to give considered strategic approaches. And of course, I welcome the financial support for GIS as much as possible. But I want you to know about it. I want you to know that there are people thinking very hard to support the future of Medina Israel, and in that way, strengthening of all of us. And my final point, if I've run out of time to Neil, is we have to understand that we are a strong people, and our population, our Jewish population, should have the guts to express itself, to influence in every sphere of endeavor, and to know that the outcome will be nitzachon, will be victory. And by the way, I do not accept that we represent only 120,000 people in Australia. I think we're over 200,000. It's just that people aren't necessarily putting up the hand when they do the census. Know that we are much stronger than we are allowing ourselves to demonstrate to the community. And AJA is, in my opinion, doing a terrific job. I have to say, by the way, the ECAJ is doing good work. The Zionist Federation is doing good work, and I would just seek that everybody should try to work together and have mutual respect and recognition.
Dr. Danny Lamm, thank you so much for your incredible insights tonight. It's been such a pleasure to listen to you, to hear your insights. I mean, we couldn't agree more. We feel that the more we can do as a community, the more united are, as long as we're proud of our Judaism and we are Zionist, there is nothing more that needs to divide us, and we can work together, be a united and strong community to face what's against us. Once again, thank you for joining us live from Israel. This has been recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel, replayed on J-Air. Please share with your family and friends. And one final reminder, this Sunday is our charity day, our one opportunity where we will call you, ask for your support. Please do go to that charity link, charity.com/AJAT. That's charity.com/AJAT. It is open now for donations. Please support us this year. We really rely on all of our members, supporters, and followers to be strong for another year here at AJA. Thank you again, Dr. Danny Lamm. What an absolute pleasure. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for being on board, everybody. Just a pleasure to speak to you all.